Episode 31, The Pressure to Know, HR, AI, and the Performance of Expertise. There's a moment I've started to notice more and more in conversations with HR leaders. It usually sounds something like this. So, what's your view on AI in talent? And then there's a pause. Not a long one, just a fraction of a second. Almost invisible. But if you pay attention, something happens in that pause. A quick scan. What do I know? What don't I know? What should I say? How confident do I sound? And then the answer comes, structured, reasonable, sometimes even quite sophisticated. And yet, slightly ahead of where the person actually is. I've been wondering about that gap. Because the expectation is clear. HR should be on top of this. Of AI, of skills, of platforms, of whatever is emerging next. Not just informed, but guiding, advising, leading the conversation. And the ground keeps moving. So the role quietly shifts from knowing to being seen as knowing. And those are not the same thing. I remember a conversation with a CHRO a few months ago. She told me, almost laughing, I spend half my time learning things I don't fully understand yet, and the other half talking about them as if I do. We both smiled, and then we didn't, because there was something honest in there, slightly uncomfortable. There was also a kind of fatigue, not from the learning itself, but from holding that dual position all the time. What does credibility mean in a space where nobody really knows yet? We often talk about upskilling HR, building capabilities, closing gaps. But this is a different kind of gap. It's not just between what I know and what I need to know. It's between what I know and what I feel expected to project. And that gap is not solved by another course or another certification. If anything, it gets wider. Because the more you learn, the more you see how much is still unclear, still debated, still evolving. You start to notice contradictions between experts, shifts in direction, new tools replacing the ones you just got comfortable with. So the temptation is to stabilize it, to create a position, a point of view that sounds solid enough to stand on. Even if internally it still feels a bit provisional. There's a meeting I keep coming back to. Executive team, agenda item, AI and the future of work. The CEO turns to the HR leaders and says, "Can you walk us through what we should be doing here?" It's a perfectly reasonable question. And in that moment, there are many possible answers. One is to offer a clear framework, trends, implications, a roadmap, something that reassures the room that this is understood, under control. Another is riskier, to say we are still making sense of this, not as a deflection, not as a lack of preparation, but as a true reflection of reality. And that's where it gets interesting, because that kind of answer doesn't just share information. It changes the position that you take in the system. You're no longer the expert who provides direction. You become someone who holds the question, who invites others into the uncertainty instead of resolving it for them. And that can feel exposing. What if they think I'm not up to speed? What if I lose credibility? What if someone else steps in with a more confident answer? So we compensate. We read more, we prepare more, we refine the narrative. We collect examples, frameworks, benchmarks. And sometimes, without realizing it, we start performing knowledge, using language that sounds precise, referencing concepts that are still fluid, building a sense of clarity that feels reassuring, but may not be entirely real. I'm not saying this as a criticism. It's a very human move. In many organizations, certainty is still the currency of credibility, even when the context no longer supports it. And there is something else underneath: identity. If I have built my career on being the one who knows, who advises, who brings answers, what happens when the answers are no longer stable? What part of my professional self starts to feel at risk? So there's a tension here. On one side, the expectation to lead, to guide, to be ahead. And on the other, the reality of emerging topics that don't have stable answers yet. And in the middle, the HR leader, trying to stay legitimate. Maybe the question is not, how do I know more? Maybe it's something else. What does it mean to be credible when still learning in public? What kind of language allows you to be both informed and open? How do you signal that you are engaged, thoughtful, serious, without pretending that the picture is complete? I've seen small shifts that make a difference, saying, here's what we are saying so far, and here's what is still unclear. Or, there are a few different interpretations emerging. Let me walk you through them. Or even, I don't have a fixed position yet, and I think it's worth us exploring this together. And then staying there, not rushing to close. Letting the room react. Letting others step in. Not as a loss of authority, as a different use of it. But it also requires something from the system, a willingness to sit, at least for the moment, without immediate closure, to resist the reflex of turning every open question into a decision too quickly. And that's not always easy, especially at the top, where decisions are expected, not questions. So sometimes HR finds itself translating uncertainty into something more digestible, more solid, even when it knows that solidity might not last, even when part of the work would be to help the system tolerate a bit more ambiguity. And maybe this is where the real shift is, from being the one who reduces uncertainty to being the one who helps the organization stay with it a bit longer. Not indefinitely, but long enough for better thinking to emerge. Long enough for different perspectives to surface. Long enough for the question itself to become clearer. There's no clean resolution here, just a different stance, and perhaps a quieter kind of confidence. Not in having the answer, but in being able to stand in a space where the answer is still forming. And if you think about your own conversations recently, where have you felt that small pause? And what did you do with it?